Hello and welcome everyone, it's Amethyst Rune Witch here to teach you about witchcraft and magic. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the origins of witchcraft, which is quite an unknown topic because there have been lots of mentions and particularly images of witches in various forms that have appeared throughout history, from the wart-nosed hags who are bent over cauldrons mixing a potion of some form, to cackling hags wearing pointy hats who were flying on their brooms through the night sky. There's so many images. But in reality, history for witchcraft, and witches particularly, is actually really dark and deadly. Because the early witches were the people who were practicing the craft and used spells and calling on spirits to help to bring about change. They also would have been like the healers, the midwives, the wise women, men as well, of course, just slightly fewer. But throughout history, they're always depicted as women. Now, I will be touching on the persecution of witches throughout the ages, but for today, it's the origins, or what history tells us that witchcraft started as. Now, most witches, as time went on, were seen to be pagans doing the devil's work. Obviously, a very churchy definition, because the devil didn't actually exist until Christianity and the church came along. Sorry, bad hair day today. So the witches, the healers, the wise women, their profession was misunderstood. It was working with nature, in partnership, together, with whoever they followed, if they followed anyone at all. Whereas Christianity sort of wanted to put a block smack bang in the middle, or have the thing that they called on be God. But that's a separate story. I'm very bad with tangents. Now, it's not known when witches entered the history books, but one of the earliest mentions is the story of the Witch of Endor in the first book of Samuel, which was possibly written between 931 and 721 BC. So we're talking almost 3,000 years ago, right there. Almost 3,000 years ago, the first book of Samuel was possibly written, where King Saul visited a witch because he wanted to summon the spirit of Samuel, who had passed, because he was about to fight. The very next day he was due to fight the Philistine army. And what actually happened was, he went to her, she summoned Samuel, Samuel appeared, and when asked about the outcome of the battle the next day, he was told that his 2 sons would die in battle, and that he would then die too. And the very next day, Saul's sons did die in battle, and Saul then threw himself upon his own sword and also died. So it was less a prophecy and more a, you're not going to get what you want because you turned away from God. That's how the story is told. You turned away from God, therefore this is what's going to happen. And it's quite interesting in that sense, because in the Old Testament, in Exodus chapter 22 verse 18, it states, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch or sorceress in some versions, to live. Now, Exodus is before the first book of Samuel's, so if they were so against witches, and were heavily against witches to the point where, you know, if someone even thought you were a witch, that was it. It was done. You were gone. And but Saul went to consult with a witch. So where does that leave the very basis of two main religions within the world currently? And that's quite a worrying thing, because there are other verses in the Old Testament that state that, it's not that they say, they warn against the, you know, divination or chanting or using witches to speak with the dead. Not all mediums, not all those who say they're a medium or can converse with the dead are witches. They have a gift, yes, but they aren't all witches. Now, it's not until the mid-1400s that there becomes a massive issue or a massive influx, because that's when the witch hunts started, which of course gave way to mass hysteria, which then followed the huge hunts that we know and remember from the mid to late 1400s to around about I want to say the 1600s. I really want to say the 1600s, the late 1600s. But by 1655 in Virginia, the lower Norfolk County, sorry, before that bit, because the mass hysteria followed after the Malleus Maleficarum, or what's known as the Witch's Hammer, was written and published in 1486. And that was essentially, here's a bunch of stories of what witches are like, what they do. Here's another bunch of stories as to how to find them. But here's a third set of stories as to how to deal with said witches. And that's when the whole, you know, tying them up so they couldn't swim and throwing them into a body of water to see if they sank or swam came in. That's where it all started. The Malleus Maleficarum is where it all started. But what's funny is that less than 200 years later, this is after the massive hysteria, the mass hysteria, the worldwide hysteria had died down a bit, and in Virginia, in Lower Norfolk County, a law was passed that made the false accusation of witchcraft a crime. So it wasn't to protect other people from witchcraft. It was to go, well, if they're not a witch, then there's nothing. You know, it was to protect those who weren't, but who were outsiders, who weren't fully in their local society, who could actually, you know, be a part of their community still, whilst being who they were, whilst being that outsider, that outcast. But in 1730 there was an article in the Pennsylvania Gazette which stated that some of the witchcraft allegations or accusations were ridiculous. And it's not long after 1730 that the hysteria died down and the hunts stopped, the witch hunts stopped. And laws were passed in a variety of places to protect people from being wrongly accused and even from being convicted as well. So there's a mass of, it's a lot of he said, she said. So unless there was a proven way to, unless there was a way to prove that someone was a witch without a shadow of a doubt, after 1730, that was it. It all died down. There was nothing else to be done. And until around about the last 100 to 200 years, witches would have been anyone outside of the Christian church, whether that be the Church of England, the Roman Catholic Church, whichever church, they would have been the outsider. They would have been the one who didn't quite follow everyone else and did things ever so slightly differently. And they would have had a variety of roles over the millennia, because they would have been the wise women, the healers, the midwives, the herbalists, people with knowledge of nature, of plants. But it was knowledge that the church didn't agree to, and that's the biggest thing, is that when you look into the origins of witchcraft, the history of witchcraft, the church features heavily because it was the biggest adversary of witchcraft that's ever been. And it's really not fun to be on the other side of that and go, well, there's all these memes floating around online that say, do something today, or do something at this moment in your life that would have got you burned at the stake. Because the funny thing is, no one actually got burned at the stake. Or if they did, it's not within the UK and it's not within America. They were hung, or they drowned in the bodies of water. That's how the deaths occur. But it really is, the main adversary of witchcraft was the church, purely because witchcraft didn't conform to their ideals. Women had their own place in society. They didn't answer to the head of the family. They didn't answer to the head of their church. They were separate, but they were still within the community. They would have been seen as the sages. The sage people that you went to for advice. That's what they would have been. And I hope we can learn from history not to be that way. But that is the origins of witchcraft. So it's all over the world in a variety of forms. Like, Medusa was supposed to be a witch, albeit her story was a transformational story that didn't quite have the happy ending she wanted, because she was desired by Zeus, or she was desired by someone. I'm dredging my memory here. She was desired by someone who was very high up within that pantheon, and she was up against Athena because the city of Athens was being named after whichever goddess won the popularity poll. Athena won it, but Medusa got turned into the lady we all know, with the snakes in her hair, able to, just by looking at someone, turn them to stone. She's supposed to be an original witch. I say an original witch. She's supposed to be the witch within Greek mythology, and to me, she's just misunderstood. She was a beautiful young woman who got turned into something that wasn't desirable. So she went from desirable to desirable, and that's where her story as we know it starts. That's where the Gorgon comes in. And it's just... it's like a fairy tale gone wrong almost. Because she didn't get her happy ending. And that I think is the worst thing. Is that all through history, witches haven't had their happy endings. Or if they have had their happy endings, they've had to keep quiet about who and what they are. But in today's day and age, what's the point of having so much hate? Be more love. Have more love for others. Build them up. If they say, I want to learn more about witchcraft, get them into it. Support them. Love them. Doesn't matter who they are, what they are. They can still stand in their own power. Stand true to themselves. And be there. Anyway, I think I've rambled along enough for today. So I'm going to leave it there. I will speak to you again soon. I will be back next week with another little history lesson. So I shall see you all then. Stay safe and blessed be.